Hi and welcome. This is Marjorie Saulson of Vibrant Vocal Power, your communication confidence coach, here to enable you to become a more confident communicator, whether you're speaking with one person or 1,000. So let me share my screen and let's jump right in. And first of all, once I get the full screen mode, let me review for you. We are speaking today about how to quickly calm your speaking nerves, something that everybody has. And I would like to introduce my wonderful program manager, Margaret Johnson, who will explain to you how to put questions in the Q&A box. Margaret.
Thanks, Marjorie. So yes, find the Q&A box in your Zoom panel. It's probably, if you hover toward the bottom of the screen, you will see Q&A come up. And that's where, if you will ask your questions there, please, then we will get you answers.
Wonderful. Okay, so we will start out with, I will be sharing some information for the first part of our half hour together, and at the very end is when we will do all the Q&A. So do not fear that your questions will be not answered, because we always save time for that. So let's dive right in. So this is kind of the tough love part of the presentation, because you cannot calm your speaking nerves at the last second if you haven't got your ducks in a row, quacking in tune ahead of time. By the way, I'm going to talk about two situations. The first situation is when you are making a presentation and you know about it in advance. And secondly, I'm going to go into a situation which several people I've worked with have told me about, when they're at a meeting and all of a sudden they're asked to answer a question or report on something and they've had no time to think about it. They're caught flat-footed and have to answer somehow off the cuff. But here's what you need to make sure you have in place ahead of time. Obviously, your message, a message outline or on note cards so that you can refer to it easily. I'm not a big believer in memorizing things. If you're giving a TEDx talk, okay, memorize it. But memorizing makes it really hard, because if you forget a certain word, it can throw you totally off. And then your introduction that you're going to hand to whoever is introducing you, so that that person can brag about you and you don't have to say how wonderful you are. That person does, and gets the audience all excited to hear from you. Any handouts you may have for the audience. Software and hardware if you're using slides. And make sure you confirm the date, time, venue, the setup, the contact person, the organization for which you're talking. Have all those details all lined up. The devil's in the details, and they can really blow your confidence if you don't have them all in line. And be sure that you have a list of stuff. Pack it up, put it in your car or by the door or however you travel, and have it with you so you don't forget. Your message outline on the note cards, obviously, your introduction on a clipboard. Because even if you send your introduction to the person who's introducing you ahead of time, my experience has been at 99 and 44/100% of the time, they don't have it. And so if you hand it to them on a clipboard, they can easily introduce you without the paper rattling all over the place. Handouts for the audience, if you're going to have them, your business cards, sign-up sheets and spare pens if you're going to be inviting people to sign up for perhaps a session with you or to get something. A cell phone to record your talk, that's always wonderful. And software and hardware if you're using slides. And a small desk clock. Now, why am I suggesting that? Because if you are given a half an hour to speak and you get into a room and the clock is behind you, or there's no clock at all, trying to see read the time on your watch, even if you have a watch, or on your cell phone, is very difficult to do. So it's really handy to have a small desk clock so you can keep track of the time easily. And a bottle of water. Do not depend on the host or hostess to make sure you have some, because if you need some while you're talking, it's best to have your own supply. You may not need to take it out, but have it with you. And here's what you need to do when you get there so that you can be calm and confident and don't annoy yourself. whatever. Plan to arrive 60 minutes early if you're using slides. How many times have you been in a meeting where they have to start late because they're having trouble getting the slide projector up, or there's some kind of glitch? And so if you're going to be using slides or a PowerPoint presentation, make sure you allow plenty of time, what my dear husband calls a cushion of time. Otherwise, at least 30 minutes early. And you want to greet whoever the event planner is. You want to use the restroom. Now, why do you want to use the restroom beyond the obvious reason? You want to look in the mirror and make sure you look as put together and as neat as you did when you left for the event. And check the room and the mic setup. If there's a microphone, test it. Make sure that it's working properly, not screeching. And arrange your notes, your clock, the slide setup if you're using one. And it's really wonderful if you have time and greet the attendees at the door. That warms them up to you immediately. Before you even say a word, the fact that you're at the door greeting them is a wonderful thing to do. And you can, at that time, distribute your handouts and see if anybody needs a pen. Generally, there's always a few people who need a pen. Now, what do you do in off-the-cuff situations? I remember one of the people I was working with said that in the department she works for, she was giving this report, and all of a sudden she was asked about something that she had no clue what to say. And she said she felt like an idiot. And she really felt that it blew her credibility in her organization. So first of all, stop for a minute. Ask yourself, is this in your wheelhouse? What they're asking about, is this anything to do with you? And if it doesn't, that's important to know. So, but if you do have an answer, of course, you can go ahead and share it. But sometimes you don't have the answer. So if it's something, for example, that your department or you're going to be working on down the road, you can say, you know, right now, what my priority is and what I've been working on is this, that, and the other. And I will be working on this, or our committee will be working on this next week or next month and so forth. And I will be glad to report back to you at that time. In other words, make it clear that you are working on something currently. And if this is in your wheelhouse and you're going to be doing it, down the road, say so, promise to share the information at the appropriate time. And if it's not something that's in your wheelhouse, you say, you know, that is not really something that we are focusing on in our department, or that is my area of expertise. This is something that Joe's been working on, and perhaps he can share information about it. In other words, don't feel you have to try and explain something that you don't know anything about. And if you promise to provide an answer, do provide it. You know, everybody's BS meter is always on. If you try and fake it, people know it. If you honestly say you don't know about this, or it's something you're going to be doing later, or it's somebody else's thing to do, that is much more credible and enables you to maintain your authority and expert status in the areas where you are an authority and an expert. So I have some rules of engagement in regard to this, and I've basically kind of been referring to them. And the first is truly, you are absolutely under no obligation whatsoever to answer every and any little question somebody asks you. Really, especially if the information is none of that person's business. I'm talking about personal questions. And if somebody asks you, by the way, something that's none of their business, you can certainly say something like that. You can be very polite, even though the other person's being rude. Say, you know, that's not really something that I care to discuss, or that's privileged information, or I appreciate your concern. It's so nice of you to be concerned about our situation, but it's nothing that I really feel comfortable discussing. Thank you very much. And then immediately change the subject. And if the person persists, you have to use the broken record technique. And if you're old enough to remember records, sometimes, although they've come back now, sometimes if a record hits a certain place, it'll play the same little bit over and over and over and over. So if somebody keeps nagging you, just say, I don't care to discuss that. and then walk away. You don't have to stay in a conversation with somebody who's asking you a question that's none of their business. And as far as being in a business situation, you really are under no obligation to report on something without adequate notice. That is the fault of the person asking you the question. They didn't alert you to the fact that they wanted information about something, and they're asking you to report on it without letting you know ahead of time. Now, granted, it may be something they just thought, well, you know, they're all of a sudden they're interested in it, and so they do it. But really, you really have to make it very clear and set a boundary around what you are going to say. Because if they don't give you adequate notice, you can say, you know, I really wish you had let me know you were interested in this topic. I would have brought the information with me. Why don't I get it to you later or share it at our next meeting? Something like that. You know, put the ball right back in their part, in their part of the court. Don't let yourself get sandbagged by somebody who asks you something that's out of line like that. And this is really important. You have to be a person of your word. If you promise that you're going to get back with an answer or a report at a later meeting, be sure to do it. And preferably sooner than you had promised. If you could do it sooner than expected, major points to you. So now let's get into, here you are, and you really are feeling really kind of nervous. You're all prepared. You know, whatever, you need to prepare your mindset. And this is in advance. When you know you are going to be giving a presentation or a report, and especially if it's important, please change the movies in your mind. Stop running horror movies about every possible thing that could go wrong. Start visualizing heroic movies in which everything goes absolutely right. And visualize your success. You know, there's all kinds of studies now. There was a study a number of years ago that basketball players who spend their time visualizing making perfect free throws that are all net actually improve their free throw average just by visualizing it. So you can do the same thing. And remember why they put erasers on pencils. That's a line from my husband, Saul. That's whenever you make a mistake, sometimes he'll say, that's why they put erasers on pencils. Don't expect yourself to be perfect. Nobody else is. Get adequate rest. It's really important to be well rested before you do any kind of presentation. If you are in tough shape, how do you expect yourself to do a good job? If this is what you start your day like. I couldn't resist sharing this poor guy. Hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Why hydrate? Oh, and you don't have to do it like that. But the reality is our bodies are like 70 or 80% water, and so are our brains. If we don't have enough water in our system, our brains don't function optimally. And not only our brains, but our vocal cords. Our vocal cords need to be adequately hydrated in order for us to speak comfortably and easily without coughing and ending up with laryngitis or something. Breathe. So you're thinking to yourself, Marjorie, of course I breathe. If I didn't breathe, I wouldn't be here. I'm talking about breathing where you are really focusing on the breathing, where you are counting in to 4 or 6, whatever, and taking really deep breaths where you feel your whole rib cage expand. Deep breathing, not shallow. And if you do yoga, that kind of yoga breathing, when you do that kind of breathing, it's giving your body a very strong message that you are safe, that there is nothing dangerous about getting up and sharing some information and opening your mouth and speaking. There's another tremendous advantage of deep breathing, because especially if you don't care for the sound of your voice, because an important part of the sound of your voice is how much resonance you have in it. And when you breathe deeply as you're speaking, you engage the chest resonance of your voice. When you don't engage the chest resonance of your voice, it starts to sound tinny like this. So if you want to have a more pleasant speaking voice and be more relaxed as you're speaking and feel more confident, focus on breathing, not only before you start to communicate, but while you are communicating. And the next thing I'm going to suggest is yawn. Preferably not, of course, where everybody's going to see you, but why yawn? Why yawn? Because the other place where there is a lot of resonance is in your head and in your mouth. And when you yawn, especially when you yawn from the hinge of your jaw at the back, where you separate your front and your back teeth, that gives you more resonance. And the other reason to yawn is, generally speaking, when we are nervous, one of the things we tend to do is clench our teeth. So yawning not only helps get that mouth resonance into your voice, but it helps relax you and again gives your body a message that you are safe sharing all this wonderful information that you've already prepared ahead of time. Or you are safe drawing a boundary and saying, you know, I wish you had let me know you wanted information about that. I would have brought it with me, or I would have prepared it, something like that. Breathing and yawning are really wonderful things to do. In fact, let me tell you where I learned the importance of the yawn. One of my things that I love to do is sing. And I've been taking singing lessons for many years. And my very first singing teacher used to sing with the New York City Opera. And one of the things that she told me is that one of her fellow singers, this gentleman, would spend around 10 minutes backstage before every single performance yawning in order to open up that resonating chamber in his head so his voice would sound better. Yawning and deep breathing to engage the chest resonance, and also, I'm willing to bet, to relax himself before the performance. Next thing is move. Well, not exactly like this, but the truth is that action breaks tension. Quoting my husband again, he told me that that's one of the things he learned when he was taking public speaking at Wayne State University when he was in college. And moving around really helps. In fact, one of the major online gurus, whose name I will not mention, confessed at a training that I went to that he was really an introvert and very shy. And the only way he could get himself out in front of the curtain and start presenting was that before every time he went out to speak, he did a series of jumping jacks. So even the most accomplished and seemingly confident speakers use various tricks to get themselves in a place of confidence. So I'd like to share with you some quotes, and I love this quote from John Bates. It's important to remember, when you say no to your opportunity to speak, you are also unequivocally saying no to your opportunity to make a difference, period. And I would say it's making a difference not simply for people who are listening to what you have to share, but it makes a difference for you in your own life. When you don't speak up, when you know you really ought to, or you have something valuable to share, you beat yourself up for it. You make not sharing something that you want to share makes you feel small, and it certainly makes your results small. So it's really important to get to a place where you have your own strategies for dealing with any of the nerves that come up when you're speaking. And Mark Twain, this is really kind of my favorite quote. Most people don't know that Mark Twain lost practically all the money he made from his books from some type of boondoggle, and the latter half of his life, he made his living going around, literally around the world, giving speeches. And you would think that Mark Twain, given what an accomplished writer and composer and so forth he was, would be a really confident speaker. But this is what he had to say, that there are two types of speakers: those who are nervous and those who are liars. The truth is, everybody gets nervous. The question is, do you allow your nerves to stop you, or do you deal with them and just go on? Because the truth is, once you start, the nerves kind of disappear. And keep this in mind. One of my mottos: perfection is admirable, if it's even possible, but it's not relatable. It's our mistakes and when we goof that get the audience really on our side. So, final quote from Oscar Wilde: be yourself, everyone else is already taken. So I want to offer you two invitations in appreciation for your being with me. First of all, I'd like to invite you to our next Coffee and Coaching Club meeting. And this is discussing a very common roadblock to success: fear of failure. Very often stops us. What if I mess up? What if I goof? Oh, I'm so afraid. And this stops a lot of people, a lot of us, and it certainly has stopped me at times in my life from doing things that I really wanted to do and I thought would be helpful. And so I've learned some strategies that I'd like to share with you. So that is the topic of our next Coffee and Coaching Club meeting. And second of all, I'd like you to take advantage of my complimentary communication confidence assessment. It kind of gives you an idea and clarity what are the areas where you need to increase your confidence in your communication skills. And you can find this on my website, vibrantvocalpower.com/CCA for Communication Confidence Assessment. And I want to give you a little incentive for sharing that information with me, because it's always helpful for me to know where people need assistance. Every month, I am going to do a drawing of everybody who has taken that assessment that month, and send one lucky person a copy of my #1 international best-selling book, Empowering Business Owners to Overcome Speaking Fears, whether you're talking with one person or 1,000. And so I invite you to take that quiz. Again, it's at vibrantvocalpower.com/CCA. And that concludes my official sharing of information about overcoming your speaking fears. And I now ask my dear Margaret Johnson, our program manager, who's been zealously checking into the Q&A box, to share with me any questions people have asked.
Well, Marjorie, our first question is actually a tip.
Okay.
So Jeremy said, my tip: have a go bag of the standard stuff I need to take to any presentations.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Actually, I have a go bag of all the toiletries I take when I travel, so maybe this is a good idea for when I speak as well. Thank you, Jeremy.
Carol said, and this was brief, but I have a pretty good idea where she was coming from. She said handouts before the presentation, and before was in all caps. And I think I know where she's coming from.
Okay,
Carol, I too have been taught to not give out the handouts until after the presentation. So I'm interested in your take on that, Marjorie.
Okay, so the reason I have a handout is I have a handout that's an outline of what I'm going to be sharing with just kind of little, maybe a word or two, so that people can take notes. And there's a couple reasons. First of all, it keeps them engaged and they know exactly where I am in what I'm sharing. And I always put a quote at the bottom with the last words left blank, and seeing people abhor a vacuum the same way nature abhors a vacuum. They're interested to know. If I forget to say, no, what's in that? What's the end of that quote? And every sheet that I always hand out always has my contact information, which follows my rule. of always make it easy for people to get in touch with you. So when you have a handout, it's actually a handout that enables people to take notes. And when they take notes, they're far more engaged in what you are sharing with them. The statistics for orally presented information are abysmal. Like after one day, they've already forgotten 3/4 of what you've shared. And if they make notes, even if they never look at those notes again, just writing and scribbling a few notes about what you're sharing that they think is valuable will reinforce it, and they'll remember it much more easily. And it makes it very clear that you are truly an expert because you are sharing an easy way for them to remember all the gems that you are sharing.
Very good. Okay, one final question. Deep breathing sounds great when preparing for a presentation or a speech, but what if I'm just in a group and get called on? I can't exactly yawn at the group, can I?
No, but you can breathe. And the thing is that when you are in any situation, it's always a good habit to get in the habit of breathing deeply. We tend to breathe far too shallowly, and that we just recirculate all the germs that we somehow, I don't want to say inhale. So when you focus on breathing and get into the habit of breathing so that your lungs actually expand. Your lungs are inside your rib cage. If you put your hands on either side of your ribs and breathe in, you should feel your rib cage expand. You should feel your whole body expand, and keep on doing that. That helps you keep more relaxed in any situation. And one of the ways, by the way, to practice to make sure that you keep breathing when you're talking. Another singing teacher of mine told me to practice saying, "My name is Marjorie," and to say it without taking a breath. "My name is Marjorie." Sounds terrible. And practice saying it with it. "My name is Marjorie." And practice when you are giving any talk and you're practicing ahead of time. Practice breathing as you are practicing anything. When you're talking on the phone to somebody, it's a perfect time while you're listening to them, or you're in any conversation. It's a perfect time to take a breath. And please remember the word that I shared earlier. It's a magical word. Pause. Pause. Somebody asks you a question. You do not have to immediately jump in a nanosecond with an answer. Pause. And you can say something. So, that's a good question. Let me think about it before I give you an answer. Take your time. It's really important when you are communicating with people that you communicate with your own brain first. I think there's a line that says, make sure brain is engaged before putting mouth in gear, something along those lines. And that's important to do when you are communicating, because when you allow yourself that pause to give yourself a moment or two to think about how you want to respond, you are going to be much more effective and feel much more confident about sharing whatever it is you're going to share. So, Margaret, if that's the end of our questions for today.
It is, Marjorie.
Then I thank you all for joining me, and I wish you a very happy day, and I look forward to seeing you at our next Coffee and Coaching Club meeting, where we are going to talk about failure and how to overcome fear of it so you don't let it stop you from communicating confidently and effectively in any situation. Thanks so much for being here.